What if the greatest power struggle of our era isn't being fought in the corridors of Washington or Beijing, but in the war-torn streets of Gaza? What if the word ceasefire, echoed by world leaders and desperate civilians alike, isn't the solution everyone hopes, but a fleeting pause in an endless cycle, loaded with hidden agendas and staggering costs? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the global, economic, and political forces shaping every move and every promise for peace in Gaza. The stakes: billions in aid, lives on the line, and the future balance of power in the Middle East and maybe beyond. For months, the world's attention has been riveted to the Gaza Strip. Images of shattered buildings, overwhelmed hospitals, and displaced families dominate the headlines. Israel's latest offensive against Hamas has set off not just a humanitarian crisis, but a firestorm of international diplomacy, economic maneuvering, and raw emotion. Just this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu broke his usual hardline stance. Under the glare of mounting global outrage and sanctions threats, he publicly stated Israel would accept a temporary ceasefire, but only to secure the release of hostages. "If there is an option for a temporary ceasefire to free hostages, we'll be ready," he declared. On the surface, it sounded like a concession, but what does it really mean? Because at almost the same moment, Netanyahu doubled down, making it clear that Israel's endgame remains unchanged. Total control of Gaza, whatever the cost. The message is unmistakable. Even as he nods towards de-escalation, Israeli tanks keep rolling and airstrikes thunder. The government speaks of restraint, but the realities on the ground tell another story. The world is left to wonder, is this a genuine step toward peace, or just clever political theater? To understand what's really at stake, let's rewind. The Israel-Hamas conflict isn't just this month's headline, it's a saga generations in the making. The seeds were planted decades ago, 1948. The Arab-Israeli War, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced, refugee camps swelling. Fast forward to 1967. The Six-Day War reshapes the map. East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza fall under Israeli control, fueling decades of friction and trauma. By 1987, with the birth of Hamas, a group dedicated to resistance and, in their charter, Israel's destruction, the stage was set for cycles of violence. There have been attempts at peace, of course. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s offered hope. World leaders shook hands, Nobel Prizes were awarded. But the promise of a two-state solution withered. Political assassinations, suicide bombings, settlement expansions, and shifting public moods all contributed to the collapse. For many, hope turned to bitter resignation. Then came 2007. Hamas staged a violent takeover in Gaza, pushing out rivals from Fatah. The result? A divided Palestinian leadership, with the Palestinian Authority clinging to limited autonomy in the West Bank, while Hamas ruled Gaza under a tightening Israeli and Egyptian blockade. Gaza became cut off, politically, economically, and physically, from much of the world. Since then, the region has become the stage for a tragic routine: escalation, destruction, humanitarian disaster, ceasefire, brief calm, repeat. Every attempt at a lasting resolution has run headlong into the brick wall of conflicting objectives. Trust, always in short supply, has evaporated. Economically, Gaza is devastated. Before the most recent offensive, nearly half the population was unemployed. Electricity flickered just a few hours a day. Medical supplies were limited even before the latest siege. As one local aid worker told Reuters, "Every day is a choice between hunger and safety." International organizations, including the UN and Red Cross, regularly warn about impending famine and catastrophic health crises. Yet, humanitarian convoys are often stuck at closed border crossings. All this while international donors pledge billions, money that struggles to reach its target amid blockades, political infighting, and the ever-present risk of renewed violence. But why does every ceasefire feel so fragile, so temporary? Partly, that's because no two players in this crisis want the same thing. The Israeli government insists that its security, defined as the eradication of Hamas's military capabilities and the safe return of hostages, must come first. For Hamas, survival and claims to resistance are non-negotiable. Giving up arms or control means political suicide. For Gazan civilians, the only priority is surviving another night. Yet they are caught, time and again, in the crossfire of geopolitics and history. And let's not forget the international actors. The United States, Israel's most influential ally, finds itself under increasing domestic and global pressure to demand a halt to Israel's operations. The European Union's patience wears thin. Just days ago, Hugh Lovett of the European Council on Foreign Relations urged, "The EU can no longer afford to just issue statements. Sanctions must be on the table if Israel continues its current course." On the Arab side, there's rage and fatigue. Hossam Zaki of the Arab League insisted in a recent interview, "We demand an unconditional ceasefire, immediately, to stop Gaza's suffering." But even the Arab League is fragmented, divided over how far to go in supporting the Palestinians or confronting Israel directly. To make matters worse, the ground is constantly shifting. Fresh reports of rocket attacks, expanding Israeli ground operations, and last-minute negotiation breakdowns keep pulling the region back from the brink, only to send it hurtling towards it again. Within Israel, the debate is fierce. Families of the hostages demand action at any cost. Gilead Sher, a former Israeli negotiator, voices a widespread sentiment. No government can accept a deal that brings the hostages home but lets its citizens live under threat. For the Israeli military, every pause feels like a risk, an opportunity for Hamas to regroup, hide weapons, and rebuild tunnels. Meanwhile, Palestinian politics is fractured. The Palestinian Authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, holds little sway in Gaza and faces its own legitimacy crisis. Hamas, emboldened by whatever it can claim as victory, is nonetheless battered by the relentless Israeli assault and the suffering of its own people. All this makes even modest steps toward de-escalation suspicious, complicated, and fraught with peril. Khaled Elgendi of the Middle East Institute cuts to the heart of the dilemma. A temporary ceasefire, without a broader political solution, just locks all the pieces in place. It's a recipe for more violence down the road. But what does a broader solution even look like today? Regional mediators like Egypt and Qatar shuttle back and forth, offering proposals that all seem doomed from the start. The core questions, Jerusalem, refugees, borders, basic recognition, remain painfully unresolved. The so-called peace process is, for all intents and purposes, dead. Makaimar Abu Sada, a political analyst in Gaza, sums up the view from the ground. People here are desperate for a ceasefire, not for political reasons, not for Hamas or Israel, but just to stop the bombing for even a day. It's a brutal calculus. Is a temporary halt in fighting enough? Does it merely strengthen the status quo or even prolong the suffering? As the world waits for an answer, the humanitarian crisis deepens. The latest data paints a grim picture. More than half the population displaced, thousands dead, hospitals running on fumes. The cost, in both dollars and lives, is staggering. Aid pledges amount to billions every year, but few dare to hope that even the most generous international packages will do more than stabilize the wreckage until the next escalation. At this crucial moment, the world faces a series of impossible choices. One scenario, the much-discussed fragile ceasefire, a band-aid on a gaping wound in which all sides quietly prepare for the next round. Another, full-scale escalation, drawing in regional players and upending the world's oil markets, aid flows, and alliances. Or, dare we hope, a comprehensive peace deal involving mutual recognition, land swaps, and guarantees. But such a solution seems unimaginably distant. Daniel Levy, a veteran Israeli negotiator, is blunt. Incrementalism has failed. Only a total paradigm shift will end this cycle. Powerful words. But what would that shift require, and who would take the first step? So, as Netanyahu signals fleeting openness to a ceasefire, with clear strings attached, we are left with a haunting question. Is this the prelude to breakthrough diplomacy, or just another chapter in a bitter, endless cycle? What will it take, not just to pause the violence, but to disrupt the economic and political machinery that makes it inevitable each time? The answer, and the real stakes, are coming up next. But what happens next? With Netanyahu's carefully worded openness to a temporary ceasefire, the region stands at yet another crossroads. The world's eyes are fixed on Gaza, and the stakes are extraordinary, far greater than most realize. Let's look ahead, exploring where this fragile opening could lead, and the consequences, both immediate and long-term, that might follow. Every expert we spoke to agreed. The current situation is like walking along the edge of a cliff. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, could send everything spiraling back into chaos, or worse, escalate into a broader conflict. Consider scenario 1. The fragile ceasefire holds, but only for a brief window. Hostages are released, which brings a momentary sense of relief to families on both sides. Aid trucks roll into Gaza, medicines reach desperate hospitals, and for a few days, the relentless sound of bombs and sirens pauses. People dare to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something more. But then, without any progress on the hard questions, like the future of Palestinian statehood, the fate of Jerusalem, or the lifting of the blockade, the guns may well roar back to life. Both sides accuse each other of breaking the truce. The sense of betrayal deepens, animosity hardens. According to Makaimar Abusada, a political analyst in Gaza, Gazans are desperate for calm, but without addressing deeper grievances, any lull is unlikely to last. Scenario 2 would be even more dramatic. Suppose, under massive international pressure, Israel and Hamas are pushed into deeper negotiations. Deals are cut behind closed doors. Perhaps more hostages are freed. Perhaps there's agreement on a phased withdrawal. Perhaps Egypt and Qatar step in as mediators. New actors arrive, like the EU, threatening sanctions if Israel doesn't hold fire. The world briefly unites in hope. But here, the devil is in the details. What does Israel get in return? Security guarantees, international monitors, and crucially, can either side sell unpopular compromises to its own people, who are battered by war and mistrustful after decades of broken promises? Gilead Sher, a former Israeli negotiator, put it bluntly, "A ceasefire is only meaningful if it leads to real political steps. Otherwise, it's just a pause in the fighting, not peace." There's a third path, a far darker one. The negotiations collapse, the ceasefire unravels almost before it begins, and the violence explodes anew. This time, regional players, Lebanon's Hezbollah, or even Iran, might be drawn in. The risk of a wider Middle East war becomes terrifyingly real. Humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza deepens. The international community, divided and frustrated, can do little but send aid and pleas for restraint. And for the average person, whether in Tel Aviv, Gaza City, or far outside the region, this all feels like a never-ending nightmare. Why does this keep happening? Are we doomed to watch the same tragedy unfold again and again? Yet recent months have forced even the most cynical observers to confront difficult truths. First, there is a hint, just a glimmer, that the usual rules may not hold forever. The sheer scale of destruction and global outrage is pressuring governments like never before. As Hugh Lovett from the European Council on Foreign Relations argues, this is not just another round. There is genuine momentum for external actors to act decisively. The status quo is untenable. The United States, the EU, and Arab League countries are all recalculating their positions. International aid organizations warn that if Gaza's infrastructure collapses any further, the consequences will echo for generations. Meanwhile, a new generation of Israelis and Palestinians are demanding answers, refusing to simply accept the bitter inheritance of endless conflict. So, what does all this mean for you watching at home? Why should it matter? The answer is as much about the world's future as it is about this particular sliver of land. Conflicts like this are not isolated. They send ripples across economies, politics, and global security. Oil prices spike, markets react, and even faraway governments must decide which values they stand for. If the international community cannot find a way, any way, to at least stabilize the Israel-Hamas conflict, what does that say about our ability to solve other global crises, from Ukraine to Sudan to climate change? But on a more personal level, understanding the dynamics here gives us tools to recognize the warning signs of other intractable disputes, whether in geopolitics or even in our own communities. Here are several key insights anyone can apply. First, almost every conflict that looks hopeless is, in fact, the conclusion of hundreds of smaller failures. Failures to compromise, to listen, to recognize the humanity of the other side. That doesn't mean solutions are easy, but it does mean they're not impossible. History has shown that even the bitterest enemies have, at times, swapped violence for talks. Sometimes, as in Northern Ireland, South Africa, or Colombia, achieving the unthinkable. Second, outside pressure matters. Public outrage, diplomatic pressure, and even economic sanctions have occasionally shifted the calculus. In a world where global citizens can communicate and mobilize in hours, raising awareness is not pointless. It can save lives. Third, it's vital to look beyond headlines. In this conflict, terms like ceasefire, humanitarian corridor, and even peace process often mean very different things to different sides. As Khaled El-Jindi points out, without clarity and accountability, temporary deals risk deepening divisions. Fourth, recognizing deep-rooted grievances is essential. No agreement will last if it ignores core issues, the rights of refugees, the future of Jerusalem, and basic security for all. This applies beyond the Middle East, wherever entrenched injustice festers. Finally, don't fall for cynicism. The perception that nothing ever changes is, ironically, one of the most powerful barriers to change. As Daniel Levy, a veteran peace negotiator, reminds us, history's hardest walls have a way of crumbling, just not when or how skeptics expect. So what can individuals do? Stay informed, go beyond the headlines, support organizations that bring humanitarian relief, promote conversations, online or offline, that avoid dehumanization. Press your elected representatives to support genuine conflict resolution, not just empty slogans. And above all, stay engaged. Wars are driven not by anonymous forces of destiny, but by decisions, made by people, responded to by people. After so many years of heartbreak, is there a real chance for change? Here's the truth. Nothing is certain. As of today, a true breakthrough is still distant. Both sides remain far apart. Netanyahu's conditional ceasefire offer may be, as some analysts suggest, more of a tactical move than a step toward real compromise. Hamas, bruised but not defeated, continues to hold out for maximum gains. The most likely outcome in the short term is a tense, fragile pause, marked by intermittent violence and little political progress. And yet, something feels different. The sheer depth of suffering, the scale of global outcry, and the visible exhaustion on all sides cannot be dismissed. Even small steps, a few more hostages freed, a few more days of quiet, a little more food and medicine, save lives. These are not empty gestures. And here's a secret fact, often overlooked. Sometimes, in the history of intractable conflicts, breakthrough moments arrive just when almost everyone has given up. That's what happened in the darkest days before the Oslo talks, or the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. The will to keep pushing for dialogue, even when it seems futile, is itself a source of hope. So as we close, remember, the cycle of violence is not inevitable, but breaking it requires courage, imagination, and relentless, patient effort from leaders and ordinary people alike. Don't look away. Remain engaged. Demand better from those in power and from the media narratives you see around you. If you found this breakdown helpful, share it. Help others understand the forces at play and why every step towards peace, however small, matters. Tell us what you think in the comments. Is there still hope for real change in the Israel-Hamas conflict? Or are we watching history repeat itself yet again? If you want more in-depth explorations of world affairs and how they impact each of us, subscribe and join our community. Together, maybe we can be the generation that helps bend the arc of history, even if just a little.